And she could see the earth off in the distance. And they said, that's the cradle. That is where your home is. That is the home of humanity. And yes, we would like to work with you, and we will teach you how to pilot the craft. And this is when her experiences really ramped up. From that point on, she started having experiences pretty much weekly, 2 or 3 per week, all the way from age 14 up to age 19. These visits were mostly focused on learning how to pilot the craft. And they would take her up and teach her. And this was fully conscious. These experiences would last hours at a time, sometimes days, because they would take her to the learning planet as well, the tree planet, where she continued to be taught. So from this point on, Dolly was a fully conscious contactee and kept it absolutely secret from everybody, except occasionally she would speak about it with her father. She did have another friend at school who turned out was also having these same experiences. So she was able to share it with this one friend, but that friend eventually moved away. So this was quite stressful for Dolly. She was basically living 2 separate lives, one with the ETs and one back on Earth. And it was culture shock every time, because she'd come back on Earth and it was a much more violent place where you had to lock your doors, and there was crime and pollution and all this stuff. Whereas with the ETs, it was almost a utopian existence where she was very wide open psychic. Communication was very telepathic. Everyone knew what everyone was doing, and it was all about learning. So from age 14 to 19, her experiences were largely focused on learning how to pilot the craft. Here's another drawing from Dolly showing the actual pilot's seat. And you can't quite see it here on top, but there's a little sphere which comes down. And this is how Dolly would pilot the craft. It's largely telepathic. She basically connects mentally with the craft and is able to sort of empathically, or if you will, remote view and connect with the craft psychically. And this is how they pilot the craft. It's very much a empathic, psychic, telepathic connection. And they taught her how to do this. And what they basically do is they generate very high amounts of electricity, and using the magnetic fields of our planet and the magnetic sheets throughout the universe, they are able to travel great distances at very high speeds. And how they travel great distances is obviously not with propellants. They open up a dimensional doorway and are able to sort of pop through it. And the first time Dolly got to fly by herself, controlling the craft, was at age 19. And they sat her down in the chair, and she telepathically connected. They all got ready, and boom, she popped out at another planet in another solar system, a huge purple gas giant. So after this, Dolly's experiences really shifted a little bit. She started having some really fantastic adventures where she would travel throughout the universe. At age 19, she did have a missing time event, because that was pretty rare. She would usually remember, but at age 19, she was working as a security guard at Wells Fargo and had a missing time event at work. And it really freaked her out because she was walking into an elevator. Next thing she knows, she's walking out. She had a co-worker who's looking at her strange. And Dolly says, "What just happened? Did I do my rounds?" They had to check to make sure all the doors were locked. And she had done her rounds, but she didn't remember. And her hand was really sore. And so the next time she had a contact, she asked about it, and they said, "Yes, We took you on board. We had to put an implant in your hand. And this allows her to connect with the craft. This has been x-rayed. She's gone to doctors who freaked out every time that they see this. They're like, what is that in your hand? And Dolly's very coy about it with the doctors. She doesn't really want to tell them, oh, it's an alien implant. But yes, she's definitely been implanted. She's had evidence of this throughout her childhood. She pulled one out when she was a little girl, out of her ear, out of her nose. She watched it dissolve. She got in trouble with the ETs. They took her on board. They said, you need to stop pulling these implants out. They're for your good. And they explained to her that they monitor her health, monitor the levels of pollution in her body, boost her immune system, this sort of thing, which is absolutely what I've heard from other people. So now Dolly's experiences really began to expand, and they began to take her not only to the learning planet, but on board these huge, what we would call motherships. They call them just craft. And some of these are absolutely massive, miles in size, and contain huge arboretums, nature preserves, animal husbandry centers, big science centers, giant lakes. And when I say giant, I mean like the size of perhaps one of the smaller Great Lakes, huge. And Dolly says these craft are incredibly advanced. They are able to open them up to sunlight. They're able to simulate a natural environment. So it looks like you're on a planet. But on board these craft are not only all manners of earth animals, but ET animals as well. The ETs are basically collectors, they're gardeners, they're doing their best to preserve life and perpetuate life. And this became one of Dolly's missions, was to come down and scoop up plant life and animal life from Earth and from other planets. This became a real big push in the late 1970s when we started having real troubles with species on our own planet going extinct. And this was a big mission where they would come down and scoop up animals. So nothing will go extinct on our planet because the ETs are collecting everything, not only human genetics, but animals and plants. And often what they will do is they will put them on these motherships and then transport them to other planets, because there is a problem with gamma radiation in space. And ETs have a real problem with it. This is why they are collecting our own genetics, because they do have some trouble reproducing. And this is the whole point of the hybrid baby program, which Dolly is a part of. She does have hybrid children. And in fact, she did get to meet her full-grown hybrid son once in her home following an injury, which if I have time, I'll talk a little bit about. At any rate, this was another big part of her experiences. And she would also be taken to other star systems, other planets. This is a big part of her lesson. The ETs wanted to teach her that there is life throughout the universe. And Dolly's experiences, yes, there are many, many planets. Many of them are very much Earth-like. In fact, this is why, I wanted to call the book Dolly Among the Stars, because it was just this amazing adventure. And I asked Dolly, do you have a title in mind that you would like to call this? Because it's really your book. And Dolly said, yes, I'd really like to call it Symmetry. And I thought, wow, that's a very interesting word. Why? Why would you want to call it Symmetry? And it turned out this was a big lesson from the ETs. One of the main things they wanted to teach her was that there is life throughout the universe, and it's very much Earth-like. So they would take her to other planets, and there would be pine trees and fish and birds and pigs and bulls, and life very much like on Earth with slight variations. And the lesson was that life throughout the universe follows a very balanced symmetry. It's very similar. And not only life, but the whole structure of the universe itself, all the way down to the atomic level with atoms, all the way up to the human body, and at a much larger astronomical level with planets and galaxies. There's an incredible symmetry to life on Earth. So that was a big lesson. Real briefly, she had a really interesting experience. I was talking to Dolly about an experience that Betty Andreasson had, where she had seen a man shrunk down in size. When Betty Andreasson saw this, she asked the ETs, "What did you just do to this man?" They shrunk him down from a 6 foot tall man to about a foot high. And they said, "Oh, we call that deopulating." And they could shrink people down. And when I told Dolly that, I asked her, "Have you ever heard of anything like that?" And she said, yes. She was on board the craft once when they did that exact thing. She saw a 6 foot man placed into a chamber and shrunk down to 2 feet in size. And they carted him away. And she started talking to Talata, the ship. He's an interdimensional entity, a high dimensional entity who embodies the craft. But he's, a person, an entity. He did have a lifetime on Earth way back in the past. Dolly asked him. So he's really her go-to guy. She's in constant telepathic contact with him. And when this guy got shrunk down, she asked him, "What was that? Why are you doing this? What is going on?" Because it was just phantasmagorical. And Talata told her, "Well, as I've taught you, there is a macro universe and a micro universe. You don't think everyone in this universe is the same size, do you? There is a macro universe and a micro universe." And he really wouldn't explain much more beyond that. But Dolly says, "Can I try that? Would you do that to me?" And they said, "No, nope, we're not doing that to you." So all kinds of really amazing adventures. And occasionally they would take her to other planets. And one planet they took her to quite often was this water world. And this was almost entirely covered with water, salt water. They're, generally speaking, the oceans are filled with salt on other planets. She says this planet was dotted with millions of little islands, but was very much Earth-like. The air there is extremely pure and rich. And here's where they would take her frequently, from before age 14, later on, all throughout her life. She's been there many times. And they would teach her science and how to do grid work and counting the life and sort of following the evolution of the planet. And at one point, they did take her to a small village there where people do live. They're very much like here on Earth, sort of like Pacific Islanders, slightly darker skin. They have thicker hair. They're just slight variations. Dolly would talk to this little girl named Mia, and they were both fascinated to sort of study each other, because Dolly has a lot of freckles, and Mia, the other girl, was fascinated by that. And Dolly was fascinated by the differences as well. The girl had, thicker hair, smaller teeth, a smoother tongue. People on this planet live very naturally in little villages without a whole lot of technology. There's no locks on their doors. There's no government. There's nothing like that. No money. Everyone lives cooperatively. They speak telepathically. They're more spiritually advanced than we are here on our planet, and are in regular contact with the ETs at all times and go on board their craft. It's a much different lifestyle, but in many ways very similar. So this is one of several planets Dolly's been taken to. She's also been taken to what we call Dyson spheres. A Dyson sphere is a concept that first appeared here on Earth in around 1935 with a science fiction writer by the name of Olaf Stapledon. And it describes a huge sort of artificial world. And Freeman Dyson is a scientist who really popularized this concept, but it's real. The ETs do build these massive sort of artificial planets. Dolly's been to them, not a whole lot, a half dozen times. And the first time they took her there, she didn't even realize it. She thought she was on a planet. And they said, no, this is what you would think of as a Dyson sphere. It's an artificial world. And if they hadn't told her that, she would never have known, because there's Earth, there's a blue sky. It's very, very advanced technology. And there's quite a few of these, Dolly says. First time she only saw it from the inside, but later she was able to see them from the outside. They're in some ways kind of like the Star Wars, the Death Star, not quite. But yeah, ETs are able to build these artificial worlds. So they have a technology that is so far beyond our own. It's almost unimaginable. And I'm not going to be able to talk about all of Dolly's experiences, because this is a lifetime. Dolly's now in her mid-60s. So I'm still learning about new things each time I talk to her. I've done literally hundreds of hours of interviews with her. I'm still learning new stuff. One time they did take her to a planet which was at the end of its life cycle, because the star was going nova. And the entire solar system was being swallowed up by this star. And they wanted to show her the evolution of a solar system, of a star, of these planets. And this planet, the first time they took her to it, she was just a little girl, and it was being torn up. There was just a few bits of life left. Most of the animal life was gone. The forests were burning up. The lakes were evaporating. And they showed her this. And they did not land. They viewed from a safe distance. And every few years, every 10 years or so, they'd take her back. And as an adult, she went back final time, in time to see this planet actually get torn up to pieces and completely swallowed up. And this turned out to be a star that we do know of. This was filmed by the Hubble telescope that went nova. And this was I think 80 million years ago in our time. But again, the ETs do have the ability to travel back in time. And this was very apparent to Dolly from the very beginning, because they would take her from her bedroom, take her to the tree world, and she'd spend 3 days there, a week, 2 weeks. And then they drop her back into her bedroom minutes later, or maybe an hour later. So their ability to pull people out of the time stream is something, that they can do quite easily, or even go back in time. So this is how advanced they are. And these are the kinds of experiences Dolly's having. As an adult, one of the main missions she had is what we call abductions. They do not call them that. Dolly does not agree with that word at all. She doesn't feel like she's ever been abducted. She was invited on board. Her experiences have been almost exclusively very positive. And according to Dolly, people are not abducted against their will. The problem is there's a lot of fear surrounding this subject. Our media is very fear-based. People are trained to fear. Fear is a guiding force in our lives. We are trained to look at anything that's different as bad. And when people are pulled on board a craft, they have a very strong fear reaction. And Dolly has seen this firsthand, because she is there on the craft when this happens. And more often than not, people are very afraid, and this clouds their reactions, their perceptions, and they feel like this is not good for me. I didn't ask for this. I can tell you, long before I met Dolly, having interviewed hundreds of people, most contactees who go through this at some point do face their fears and get past that and realize that the ETs are not trying to hurt people. They're not trying to scare people. And in fact, if you look at what actually happens when someone's taken on board, the scariest part is being physically examined. And yes, this can cause trauma and PTSD and nightmares and so forth, but often people are healed. And this was the main mission concerning what the ETs call gathering the children, which happens, of course, not only to children, but to adults as well. But they look upon humanity as, children, as friends, as brothers and sisters, as equals. And healing humanity and guiding them and teaching them is their primary mission. And this is why they are pulling people on board, to heal them, to teach them. And this is what I found long before I met Dolly. They're taken to the engine room, shown how the craft flies. They will teach you. They'll take you to the observation deck, show you the stars, show you the moon, take you to Saturn. I've got multiple cases of this. So when I met Dolly and she started telling me her narrative, it was really illuminating for me, because everything she's told me, I've heard sort of piecemeal from other people, but she was able to provide a continuous narrative and sort of fill in the blanks and connect the dots and confirm what I've learned from other contactees. And so she became part of this project of gathering the children. And Dolly does speak Swedish and other European languages, and often they go to Europe and scoop people up and heal them and guide them and show them how to go out of body, how to do telepathy, how to do telekinesis, how to do healing, teach psychic development. That was a big part of it, guiding people in their life mission. Unfortunately, a lot of people do have a strong fear reaction. And when that happens, they will allow you to not remember. They'll often set up a trigger or a cue so you can remember later when you're ready. But this is absolutely for our own benefit. And that was something Dolly really wanted to make clear here, because when she started looking at UFOs in the subject in the media, because she had not read any UFO books, she kept away from it. She realized it was very fear-based and being presented inaccurately. And that was one of the main reasons she wanted to come forth, to let people know that this is not a negative experience, and that it's our own fear clouding our perception of what's going on here. And I skipped ahead there a little bit. Dolly has been healed on several occasions, or even rescued once she was lost. And it was late at night. Talata showed up and guided her home. Once she hurt her knee really bad, and they pulled her on board and healed her. Dolly has a very strong connection with animals, as pretty much all contactees do. At one point, Dolly actually worked as a zookeeper, and this gibbon here pictured, her name is Sarah, came down with leukemia. And that was devastating to Dolly, and she asked the ETs to help, and they did. And the veterinarians were absolutely astonished when Sarah's leukemia reversed itself, and she suddenly, pretty much overnight, became healthy, and they could not explain it at all. And Dolly knew what had happened, and the ETs had healed her. And Sarah is now still living. She's a very compassionate gibbon who loves caring for the other monkeys. And this is a big part of the contactee experience. In fact, Dolly had a near-death experience at a very young age, went to the other side, and was told that she would be caring for animals throughout her life. And that turned out to be absolutely true. And she's had a lot of experiences in this regard. And again, that's true with a lot of contactees. So yeah, gathering the children is a big part of her experiences just recently, about a year and a half ago. She picked up a young man from Kentucky, I believe it was, who was pulled on board. This man was not happy about it. They tried to physically examine him and he would not have it. So they didn't do it. They will respect your wishes. They respect our free will. And so they just sat him down, and Dolly sat with him because he was somewhat belligerent and non-cooperative. At one point he reached out, and Dolly was trying to talk to him, and he didn't want to talk. And he reached out and pinched her arm. And you can see the mark here on her arm right here where he pinched her. And she screamed out, "Ow, don't do that." And he said, "Don't talk to me." And she says, "Fine." But the point is, they will respect a person's wishes. And there have been people who have absolutely said, "Stop contacting me," and they will end the contact if that is what you desire to do. Another time they came down, Dolly was in the craft to scoop up a young man, and he pulled out his shotgun and shot at the craft. And the bullet pinged off the craft and actually ricocheted back and hit the man in the thigh, which was not supposed to happen, obviously. And they pulled him on board and healed him. And in this case, they did suppress his memory. They didn't erase it. They never erase people's memories. They just allow you to not remember or have a screen memory. And they healed him. It took 2 days. They put him back just minutes afterwards, and he never knew what happened. Dolly has been under surveillance from the secret government her whole life. In fact, at age, I think it was 12 or so, she was followed home. They tried to kidnap her. And from that point on, her father hired security guards. But even up to this day, Dolly's under constant surveillance. I saw it happen myself when I met Dolly face to face. We attended the UFO conference in Laughlin a year and a half ago, and we were followed to the bed and breakfast. And I'm like, "Dolly, I think we're being followed." And we went inside, and one of these cars pulled up and blocked the driveway. I'm like, look, Dolly, who's that?" And she's like, "I'm telling you, I told you, this is what I have to live with." And in fact, I did get to see Dolly's UFOs firsthand when I met her. They came down and hovered overhead. I missed the really good sighting, which occurred a day earlier, but Dolly did catch it on film. I am going to play some films here shortly, because I want you to see that Dolly does have really good evidence. She's shown me medical records that confirm what she's talking about. I've seen the craft myself. She's been able to film these. When she decided to go public, she asked Talata if he would allow himself to be photographed, because he never, ever would. And he finally agreed and said yes. Dolly has been on board these craft when they've put on displays for groups of people, doing CE5 work. She's on board the craft, and down below, people are down there with their laser pointers or their flashlights and doing meditation, trying to call them down. And in fact, Dolly has been on board the craft when they posed for some very famous incidents in which they allowed themselves to be filmed. So they are doing this sort of publicity campaign where they are announcing their presence bit by bit to humanity. And that is another one of the missions that Dolly has been involved with. But yeah, she's under constant surveillance, which has caused quite a bit of stress. So here's one of the photographs she was able to capture. This is actually taken from a moving film, which I will play for you shortly. This was in Georgia, I believe, where Talata came down and hovered about 200, 300 feet over the house. Here's a close-up. This was a picture taken in Laughlin. The one on the left here is Talata. You can see the sort of shape of the craft here, and he's flashing his light. uh, and allowing himself to be photographed. And here is Talata. This is again in Laughlin, year and a half ago in June, where he dropped probes. And wherever Dolly goes, she is followed by Talata. She's protected. And she's able to capture a number of really impressive photographs. And here's Talata flashing his headlights at her. Shoot, you can't see the one in the other picture, but at any rate, let me play a little piece of footage for you. This is a daylight encounter where she was able to capture a really impressive piece of footage. So that's just one of many really impressive photographs and films Dolly has been able to take. Here's another one I'd like to play for you, which is, let's see, 2 minutes long. And you can't see anything in the beginning, but if you wait, you will see this craft flashing. So just be patient here. And this is another instance where Talata agreed to be filmed to help publicize Dolly's case. And there you can see it right now. And I believe this is where he drops probes. So I'm almost done here, just a few more slides. Dolly does have corroborating witnesses to her case. Uh, her ex-husband, her neighbors, her friends, myself. And here, and here's where it drops drones. Yeah, I've talked to a lot of contactees. Rarely do they get this good of evidence. So there you go. Now let me play probably my favorite footage of that, certainly from Dolly, but really this is amazing footage of Talata coming down about 200 feet over a house. And this is a window right here, and she's looking up above the house. And there's Talata. You can actually see the physical craft there. It's metallic. There's lights. This is just a minute and a half, so not too long. Again, that's a window. So there you go. And so that is Dolly's story in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it. One experience I want to mention real quickly, Dolly had slipped on the ice and broken her elbow. And she woke up in the middle of the night to get something to drink. And she was in the kitchen when a gray appeared and a tall white, and it turned out to be her son, her hybrid son, who was full grown. She's looking at him, couldn't believe it. She, was having this fully conscious experience in her kitchen. And she's like, "Who are you?" And he says, "You know who I am." And Dolly's looking at him, kind of recognizing him, but not quite putting it together. And he says, "I'm your son." And that's when she realized, she saw the resemblance. This was her first of, I think, 3 hybrid babies. And he came to check up on her and ask if she's all right. And she said, "Yes, I'm fine." She was quite bruised up. He went up to her and healed her of some of these bruises. And basically they had a long conversation. And he said, "I'm always watching over you. I want you to know that I love you and you're going to be fine. We will take care of you." And so forth. And this was a very, very emotional experience for Dolly. And they held hands. She kept touching his face. And it was just a really wonderful experience where she got to meet her full-grown hybrid son. She asked him, "How old are you?" And he tried to explain it to her. He says, "I'm older than you think because I don't live in your time stream. I'm out there flitting around the universe and doing all this stuff, and I only occasionally come back into your time stream." But described that he was in his 20s as she would think of it. So yeah, that is Dolly's experiences. And hopefully she can answer some questions for you. But I want to thank you for listening to this presentation. I'm very, very impressed by Dolly. She's proven her experience to me firsthand. And I think her experience really does give an accurate sort of viewpoint of what's truly going on with the contactee experience. So thanks very much. And yeah, happy to answer questions. I'm sure Dolly is too.